The information in this lecture is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended to substitute for the advice provided by your doctor or other healthcare professionals. You should not rely upon or follow the program or techniques or use any of the products and services made available by or through the lecture without obtaining the advice of a physician or other healthcare professional. The nutritional and other information in this lecture are not intended to be and do not constitute healthcare or medical advice.
This is Dr. Ray Cooley, and he's a chiropractor, and I'm going to let him tell you more about where his practice is and the focus of his practice and what his topic is going to be today. So thank you very much for coming.
Thanks for having me. All right, did everyone get one of those sheets like Alright, well, yeah, so I'm Dr. Cooley. I'm actually from Buffalo originally. I went to University at Buffalo for undergrad. My background, my undergrad was actually in chemical engineering, which is kind of, I think, why I gravitate towards this biochemistry side of chiropractic. But when I first graduated from school, I basically did what most other chiropractors do. I did a lot of like manual therapy, like muscle type work on patients, and then I would do like typical like spinal adjusting. And it would bother me that you could have two people come in with like the same low back complaint, and you do the same treatment on both of them, and one person would get better and the other person wouldn't. And trying to figure out why that other person wouldn't get better kind of led me down this path of, well, one, trying to figure out better ways to evaluate patients. And I'll show you kind of how I evaluate people at the end. But what it ended up really leading me towards was what really drives these people that are in a state of chronic pain is they're in a state of chronic inflammation. And until you can figure out why the person is inflamed, they're always going to have issues. And what's happened because of that, because I got into inflammation as a way to try to go after injuries. But if you start addressing inflammation, you can realize that you can address a lot of other issues, and we're going to kind of talk about that. So what do all these chronic diseases have in common? So we're looking at, there's a lot of stuff on that list, and honestly, any disease you can think of, there's going to be an inflammatory component to it, whether or not it's the primary issue why someone has that problem. But almost anything that somebody is dealing with on a long-term basis, let's just take a thyroid issue because it's so common in this area. You might go to the doctor and they run your labs. You might see that your TSH is elevated, and then they're gonna be like, oh, all right, you got a hypothyroid, your thyroid's underactive. And they might give you like a thyroid prescription to bring that number back into check, but they really, and then that's nothing wrong with that approach, but they haven't really explored that next level as to why that thyroid number was off. And most people, their thyroid number is going to be off due to some form of Hashimoto's. And the reason Hashimoto's is there is because that's an autoimmune condition. So if you keep backing it up, you really, in order to address why you have thyroid issue, you really need to back up to the immune system and why you have this autoimmune response. And that's just one example. It's kind of it's very similar for almost anything on this list, like mitochondrial dysfunction or chronic fatigue. That's like a kind of a hot topic. I don't know if anyone's gotten that diagnosis, but it's becoming a more common diagnosis when someone goes to see their doctor. And from my perspective, one of the big reasons why someone has chronic fatigue is their body is already inflamed, like too inflamed, and it intuitively knows that I can't keep making energy because making energy can be an inflammatory process. So the body basically shuts down those energy producing enzymes. And that's a big reason why people have chronic fatigue. But we'll keep going. If you have questions, truthfully, I actually just like you asking them during the presentation. If we get too caught up, then I might move them to the end. But if you have a question about something, just stop me because I'd rather just talk off the cuff, honestly. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about chronic fatigue. Define that more as opposed to just being tired every day after work. Is it something more difficult?
Well, I mean, it depends on the person, honestly. Like chronic fatigue patients, so fatigue is the #1 complaint, most common complaint in any doctor's office. It might not be the reason why someone went to the doctor, But if you were to like look at my symptom survey or look at anybody else's symptom survey, fatigue is like the most often checked one. That being said, like there's definitely, it's kind of like pain. Like pain is really kind of in the eye of the beholder. Chronic fatigue is kind of in that same envelope. Like it's very similar. Like what one person thinks is being tired all the time versus some people are like, they can't get out of bed. They'll take a nap for like 8 hours. Like there's like different levels to it. So it's kind of hard to say. There's really no one definitive diagnosis for it, honestly. It's kind of
The definition of what chronic fatigue is, I guess it's in the eye of whoever.
yeah. I mean, that, like unfortunately, like that symptom or that, I don't really want to call it a disease, but it's basically you're labeling something. It doesn't. There's no like real concrete like definition of it. And honestly, that's kind of the way for most of those diagnoses.
Yeah.
You know. So, oh yeah.
Concerning chronic fatigue, if after most meals that you eat, you become extremely tired
Yeah.
to where sometimes non-functional or just maybe you have to wait a half an hour or so.
Yeah, I mean, a big reason for that, it depends on what you're eating. So,
Healthy or otherwise, doesn't matter.
there could be a couple reasons for that. One, if you're eating, like, the biggest reason why someone gets tired after they eat is because of the body can't handle the insulin spike that happened after they ate. But if you're eating a food that really shouldn't drive your insulin levels up, you're probably having some digestive issue that's like really, your body can't digest that food very easily. So it's diverting all its attention that way. So it basically kind of shuts you down. So that would be the biggest reason for that. But the most common reason why most people get tired after they eat, like at turkey or Thanksgiving, like everyone thinks it's like the tryptophan in the turkey, which is kind of BS. What really it is, you overate and your insulin levels are like through the roof, and that causes these mechanisms to shut down your. It increases these serotonin levels that tire you out, basically. Yeah, right. So when we're talking about inflammation. Inflammation and pain get kind of used synonymously, but they are different things. Like inflammation is really, I cut my finger. What heals that wound is inflammation. So it's this chemical process that occurs in a response to tissue injury. So like a good example would be like, all right, say like a tornado came and like hit this town. The alarm going off and like sounding the authorities, that's kind of like the pain alarm, right? That's like the signal like it's sent to tell the proper authorities, like, all right, you guys got to go do something, or something's wrong, right? But like the cleanup crew coming in, like the tornado hits, there's all this damage. You got to come in there and clean all that stuff up. That's kind of like what inflammation does, and it helps to like remodel things. What happens when people get stuck in this state of chronic inflammation? It's almost like the cleanup crew got called in, they did their job, but then the next day they came back again. And the next day they came back again, and you never actually reached this point of like rebuilding, or you never shut down that cleanup crew, basically. So you never actually heal. So that being said, like without inflammation, we'd all be dead, and like we'd cut and we'd bleed out, or we'd get an infection and we'd never get over it. So it's not like we don't need it. We probably need it more than we don't need it, actually. But the biggest thing with all those diseases is understanding that a lot of people are stuck in a state of chronic inflammation, and that's what we need to try to avoid. And that's kind of basically what we're going to be discussing today. So like that being said, like taking ibuprofen all the time is not a good answer for inflammation. Or even like an athlete that works out too hard, they might think, oh, I got to take that ibuprofen, otherwise I won't be able to get my workout in the next day. That's really not a good idea, because you actually, in order to, like when you work out, you're basically trying to stress your system so that you can like build yourself up stronger the next time. And what builds you back up is that inflammatory process. So by taking an ibuprofen and trying to shut that inflammation down, you're actually kind of like hindering your progress. You're almost better off, like if you work out too hard, like listening to your body, be like, all right, I take a break, kind of basically enhance the inflammation, or like just endure it, and then you should be better off in the long run. The same thing could be said for like a chronic injury. I feel like sometimes patients get stuck in a chronic injury state because they're just pumping too many anti-inflammatories, and it kind of never allows them to heal properly. So the one thing I want to address with people too is, like, when you think of inflammation, you need to think of it as a systemic problem first that often will manifest itself as a local irritant. So, like, it's not uncommon if I'm treating a patient that has like a chronic hip issue or a chronic shoulder issue or plantar fasciitis that I have to be like, well, yeah, that's where the issue is, or that's where you feel it, but what's really driving that is your gut, because your gut is driving your inflammation, which is creating this issue in your foot or your hip. And, like, so you got to kind of think of that like, all right, if I have, so if I have an injury somewhere, I really need to think in terms of, like, well, maybe it's some systemic inflammatory issue why that injury isn't getting better. So maybe it's a digestive, maybe it's something going on that's creating that injury to, like, that perpetuating cycle. Does that make sense? All right. And then the other thing I think would help patients in general is if when we discussed inflammation, if we refer to it, what I really think of inflammation is chronic immune dysfunction. And if you thought of it in those terms, you'd actually have a better handle on what it really is. So, like, we just say inflammation, but we don't really understand what controls it. What really controls our body's inflammatory processes, like our inflammatory balance, is our immune system. And then if you keep backing that up, 70% of our immune system's in our gut. So a lot of people that have these chronic inflammatory issues, you really want to look to the gut first as to, like, why there's something going on there. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Those are basically, like, two key things. So what causes chronic inflammation? We're going to talk about each of these, well, most of them. So first off, diet, and Weston A. Price is definitely a good way to go to get your inflammation in check. The second thing we'll spend some time on is called dysbiosis. Free radical pathology, allergies. Well, we're going to talk about all these. I don't need to read the list, so we'll move on here. All right. What's it? Oh, there you go, right? So, like, a lot of people refer to me as, like, the butter guy. Like, and I don't know if anyone knows, like, the Buffalo Wellness Center. It's like another, like, not-for-profit group, but they always make fun of me because I'm always pushing butter on patients. But it is, like, one of the. So the Weston A. Price, like, principles, I think are a really good place to start for a healthy diet, actually. I'm not just saying that because I'm here. Like I have a milk share from Brian's farm and stuff. And one of the biggest things that I see on patients is a lack of healthy fats in their diet, and specifically a lack of fat-soluble vitamins. Like vitamin A, which is a common fat-soluble vitamin, I would say it's in my top 5 supplements that I have to use on a regular basis. More so than even vitamin D, which part of that is because everyone's already taken vitamin D, but vitamin A and D have to be in balance, and since a lot of people are already taking vitamin A or vitamin D, vitamin A is like one of the most common supplements I have to put people on. The other biggest reason why people have vitamin A deficiencies is because vitamin A is like your protective barrier for like anything that's outside of you. So that's like skin, eyes, lungs, gut, and because so many people have gut issues, they burn through their vitamin A and it carries over. So like that's the biggest reason. Do you have a question? Oh, no.
I was just yawning, sorry.
Yep.
What milligram do you recommend?
I go kind of high on that. It depends on the person. If it's a new patient, I might get up 50,000 to 70,000 IUs, which is kind of high. But after like the initial phase, I usually bring that down to like 25 to 50,000. So just to get back on topic, like a big thing with Weston A. Price, I would say like one of their, and the leaders of the group could probably correct me on this, but I would say one of their biggest things that they push for patients is consumption of healthy fats. And what they consider healthy fats is a lot different than what your general practitioner is going to consider. Mm-hmm. So for people that are new to the group or new, like I consider grass-fed butter one of the healthiest things you can actually eat. There's like 4 main fats that you want to use. Olive oil for salad dressings, you don't really want to cook with it unless the temperature is like below 325 degrees. This is a big thing too with when it comes to olive oil, or I will just say salad dressings in general. So a lot of times someone might make like a healthy decision, like, all right, I'm gonna have a salad for lunch, but then they go and they like ruin it because they take like the salad dressing from the store and it's just filled with vegetable oil, and they just douse all and now they're eating all these omega-6 fats, which drive up inflammation. So one of the biggest things I can tell anybody is try to make your own salad dressing, or just use olive oil and balsamic vinegar. So one of the things that causes someone to need to take ibuprofen all the time is if their omega-6 to omega-3 ratio is out of whack. So this means like you have too much vegetable oil intake versus like not enough fish or fish oil intake, okay? And the other thing that combined with that really screws that up is if your insulin levels are high. So like a way somebody can set themselves up for like a pro-inflammatory diet is if they eat too much vegetable oil and too much refined carbohydrates, which will drive up insulin. So that combination together can really kind of screw up your body's fatty acid profile and make you inflamed. So it makes sense when you look at what everybody's buying and what everybody's eating, why there's so many chronic disease issues. So if you could change the fats that you eat, so many things can get better. Another way to think of what these healthy fats do in your body is they kind of like act like an amplifier. So if I have a good fatty acid profile in my system, meaning like my cells are made up of nice healthy fats, and I get like a cut, or I get like some inflammation in my muscle here, like a nice healthy inflammatory response is, all right, we're going to crank it up a little bit, heal that injury, and then we're going to crank it back down. And that's what happens when your fatty acid profile is nice and healthy. But the opposite will kind of happen if it's not. Like you'll get this like big ramp up of inflammation, and then you'll never be able to like shut that down. And that's just one of the reasons. There's a lot of other reasons, but then we got any questions on that one?
I just want to ask about lard. How sure that pigs don't have sweat gland and all the toxins that are in their fat. So how is it we can eat lard and it be good?
Ideally it's going to be from the source. That is one issue with fat in general, is like when you're eating animal fats, the toxicity of that animal, you're kind of at risk. So that is one problem. So that's why the source of the animal can be really important. And that's where Weston Price can be super beneficial, because they have sources of they have all the best like meat sources in the area and everything.
Well, as long as the animal is organic, grass-fed,
Yeah, it's
pigs.
Yeah, we're all going to get exposed to stuff.
Yeah.
We just want to lessen that load as much as possible. So
that's why it's okay to eat lard, organic lard.
Yeah.
As opposed to regular.
Well, yeah, I would say it's definitely better than like cooking stuff in vegetable oil for sure.
Lard for pigs. It has to be organic.
Yeah, ideally yes, but I don't eat organic everything. I don't know, shouldn't say that, but it's just the way it is, it's just hard to do, right?
Oh,
but
yeah, I know.
That would be, you would want to strive for that, essentially.
Yeah, I'm just talking about the toxins in the pig's fat, though.
That it is a concern, for sure. Yeah.
So whether it's organic or not, it's still there.
They'll be different. An organic pig's not going to have nearly the same toxicity.
But it's considered safe to eat if it's organic.
Yeah, when you're talking about toxins in general, like definitely we want to lessen our load. But the biggest thing I think with toxins is actually improving your body to excrete them. If you're smoking all the time, that's a problem, right? Or if you're, say you're like someone that works on the highway and you're breathing in all that emissions all the time, that's a problem. Like you really need to be taking some like detox supplements probably regularly.
Right, yeah.
But as we get to this next topic here, like dysbiosis, to me this is actually the number one reason why people have toxic issues actually. So has anyone heard of dysbiosis? So it's a term that not a lot of people have heard of, which is kind of a shame because to me this is the number one reason why health, for the most part, you guys wouldn't be here if you weren't concerned about your health, right? So I'm kind of preaching to the choir for this thing. But this is the number one reason why health-conscious individuals can be stuck in a state of chronic inflammation. Like I have plenty of patients that their diet is locked in, but they still have all these issues. This is the main reason. So what dysbiosis is we have exposure and we're made up of all these different organisms, like in our gut, for example, you have all this different bacteria, you actually have fungus and you have all these things in there, and they should be in a certain balance, right? But they can be thrown off balance, and that can set off your immune system and create this chronic inflammatory issue in your gut. Unfortunately, fortunately, current research has shown how much having chronic monovirus or Epstein-Barr virus, how that could affect someone with rheumatoid arthritis. There's actually a ton of research on this stuff. Where I think we get into trouble is it's really hard to take that information and use it in the typical general practitioner clinical setting. It's nothing against them. It's just the way it is. It's hard to know what is driving this person's inflammation at what time. Is it a virus? Is it a bacteria? Is it a fungus? Is it, most of the time, it's actually kind of a combination of all these things. It's the total load on the system is what actually screws the person up. So to me, when I'm treating someone, every practitioner has their own biases, right, when they're treating someone. You'll see someone that does emotional stuff, they're going to think every problem you have is an emotional problem. I'm structurally and inflammation based, and from an inflammation standpoint, I'm biased towards this. This is the biggest thing I'm looking at when I'm trying to treat somebody. Because to me, this sets up everything else. Leaky gut stuff, which probably a lot of you guys have heard of, which drives allergies. If you have this going on in your gut, it's almost like you have your own chemical plant going on in your body too. So when you're talking about toxins, this is probably the number one toxin producer. So all these things really get driven from this. And a lot of the stuff on the periphery, when people talk about adrenal function or even a lot of brain issues, I still think are secondary to this. It doesn't always happen that way, but this is the biggest thing I'm always looking at in patients. So, yep, go ahead.
Parasites, is that common, or is that
It is common, actually. It's kind of hard to explain how the way I test for them is going to be different than if you had some stool test done for it. I'm kind of looking at more of a neurological response to it, and people respond to them very frequently, which I'm not really doing a good job describing it. I guess I could just say it's more common than you'd think. Not necessarily. It depends. Depends on how locked in your diet is and if you get on the right stuff at the right time, basically. It can be difficult, but not always. So the best ways to correct a dysbiosis are, a lot of times if someone has ever had a candida issue, they'll talk about you can't eat sugar because that feeds the fungus. Well, in general, a low carbohydrate diet is going to help you break that cycle of a dysbiosis. Have you guys ever heard of FODMAPs? So that's those are they're carbohydrates that people have a hard time digesting. And if your body's not digesting it, it can set up an environment for a bad bacteria to digest it. And it can make so that someone that has a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which is a really common thing that's getting a lot more popular as a diagnosis. A lot of times those patients are having a hard time digesting their carbohydrates, and they're kind of feeding this bacteria in their small intestine to kind of keep perpetuating this inflammatory cycle. So
Is that like gluten?
gluten is that, but the tough thing about FODMAPs is
What
you'd
is
have
it?
to really
FOD?
FODMAP. Is you really need to like look up a list because it can be a lot of foods that you actually think are healthy, and they're not. Well, I wouldn't say they're not healthy. They're just not good for you.
Not healthy for certain people.
Yeah, yeah. Like it can, and the other thing that's tough with the FODMAP stuff is like, so like broccoli is like a FODMAP, or
Eggplant.
like
tomato.
apples, right? And like apples can be a bad one. But someone might be able to tolerate apples and not be able to tolerate broccoli. It's not like you have necessarily sensitivity to all FODMAPs. It's kind of it's a hard thing to try to figure out. But
Did you say that was FOB?
FOD,
FODMAC?
MAP.
I think it stands for fructooligosaccharides, right?
Yeah. So fructans, fructooligosaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. I think that's what it is. Yep.
Got one quick question before you go too far away from it. Do you find that diabetic people are more likely to be in a SIBO or a small intestinal overgrowth thing in your practice?
I will say that for sure. If someone has a blood sugar issue, we'll just classify diabetic in that, and they're doing the right stuff diet-wise. I'd be willing to bet money that there's a large intestine, colon, gut issue going on driving those blood sugar imbalances for sure. Like that. If you do the obvious things to fix it and it's still not going away, there's probably some gut issue driving it. So sometimes correcting a dysbiosis is like super easy, and other times it isn't. It depends on, like sometimes if you have a mold issue in your house, it'll kind of like make you susceptible to a fungus problem. And like even though you're taking the things that kind of correct the fungus issue, you never really, you kind of keep re-exposing yourself, and you kind of like keep reinfecting yourself type of thing. Or sometimes like the water source can be bad, or like sometimes they have to treat like the partner of the patient in order for them to really get better, which might seem kind of crazy, but so yeah, some of my like most chronic patients, they didn't really get like way better until I treated their significant other. Yeah, right. So a big thing too, I mean you guys are probably well aware of like antibiotics. You really want to avoid antibiotics, like what that does to your gut flora. I've seen things where like that will mess up your gut flora for like a year after you've taken them. So the more you can avoid them, the better. I mean, in some cases we kind of need to just toughen up a little bit and try to ride out these infections a little bit better, but it's easier said than done. So the big things I use for fixing a dysbiosis is these antimicrobial herbs. So I use noni. I mean, I have like 30 of them that I use, but in general, those are probably the 3 main ones that I use. Like, patients are always wondering what are these like weird supplements that I'm putting them on. It's to fix a dysbiosis issue is the main reason. And the nice thing about these herbs is they're broad spectrum, meaning like because to me it's the total load on the system. So like if you take an antibiotic, yeah, you'll make a bacterial issue better, but you might actually open yourself up for a fungus or parasite issue. Like because it's all about balance. So like in some ways you actually need to treat like the whole thing. So you want things that can like take care of a bacteria, take care of a parasite, take care of a fungus. They might not be as good as an antibiotic as getting rid of the bacteria, but they won't mess up your good bacteria as much either.
Can you read that last one? Just
Coptis.
what is that?
It's just an herb that I'll use. The one I use is called golden thread actually, but yeah.
I'm curious, do you ever use any like funguses like mushrooms like cordyceps for correcting dysbiosis?
I don't actually use cordyceps. It's just haven't. I know people use it. I don't really have a problem with it. The one that I do use is reishi.
Okay.
I've seen cordyceps and like shiitake work well. I did personally. No real reason. I just don't really use it. But all right. So let's talk about free radicals. So everyone's heard of like antioxidants. Like if they're touting some superfood, it's usually because of all the antioxidants in it. What does that really mean? So like antioxidants are like our bulletproof vests to free radicals. And the way to think of free radicals in your body is those are like chemical bullets, basically. So like what's a common thing to happen, like say you got a cold, and like a month later you're like, I'm still fighting this cold, what the hell's going on? What's probably happened is you actually don't really have the cold anymore. You don't necessarily have this like active infection. What's probably happened is you've reached this point of antioxidant depletion, and now your body's trapped in this like vicious cycle of kind of the same thing where like the cleanup crew keeps coming in and no one told them to stop coming in because you needed like the antioxidants to like tell the cleanup crew to stop coming. So this happens a lot. Like a good antioxidant is cortisol or prednisone. So this is why sometimes like if someone has like a chronic like respiratory issue, they take prednisone for a week and they feel amazing and they're good, right? Like they don't even it's gone, all right? And the prednisone doesn't really help them fight the infection. The prednisone basically stops that inflammatory cycle from constantly reoccurring over and over and over again. Not that I want you guys to take prednisone because it screws up other things, but you want to make sure that you have enough of these bulletproof vests around. So the main bulletproof vest in our body is glutathione, which a lot of people haven't heard of, which like people have heard of vitamin A as an antioxidant, or they'll hear of like vitamin E as an antioxidant. What like vitamin A does is like, so like a chemical bullet's coming and vitamin A can like stop it, but what happens is now vitamin A becomes a chemical bullet and it kind of keeps passing things along the chain until things get to glutathione, and glutathione can actually stop that bullet and then doesn't become a free radical itself. So in general, if someone has like a free radical issue going on in their body, glutathione is the most important thing for putting that process to an end. But the problem is supplementing with glutathione doesn't always work as well as you think it would. There's debates on how well we absorb it. From my perspective, the best way to raise somebody's glutathione levels is fixing their gut and their gut bacteria. So that kind of always comes back to that dysbiosis issue. Yeah.
Can't you just do it with pure food, organic food, other than chemical?
Sort of. I mean, so like glutathione is made up of like 3 amino acids. So in theory, if you had adequate protein levels, you should be able to make enough glutathione. A lot of it, like when it comes to supplementation in general, the biggest thing is figuring out why you're running out of it, rather than are you not getting enough in. It's usually not an intake issue as much as it's you're burning through it issue. So there could be a reason why you're burning through your glutathione, and you need to address that. So everything I say too, everything anyone is ever dealing with on anybody is a vicious cycle. Because if it wasn't a vicious cycle, it would just get better. So like if someone, like a good example of a vicious cycle like this is, all right, I have a dysbiosis issue. It's screwing up my gut bacteria. I'm not making as much glutathione as I should be able to. And as a result, now I'm not detoxing things as well as I should, and I'm susceptible to free radical pathology. Now I can't get out of now I'm stuck in this state of chronic inflammation because I can't make enough glutathione because of my dysbiosis. Like all these things, they just kind of all self-perpetuate. Because really, we should be able to self-heal. And all I do is actually kind of give someone the tools to help them self-heal better. But it's all about trying to identify where these vicious cycles are getting driven from and try to figure out what the person needs to come out of it. So this one actually didn't have in here, but I just put it in here today because the allergies. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I had a question on glutathione.
Yeah.
When you said that it's difficult to supplement with glutathione because it's not easily fixed with supplementation, when you use the word supplementation, do you also mean injections of glutathione as well, or you mean just oral?
Glutathione injections can work pretty well.
Okay.
They're just kind of crazy expensive. They're not super feasible for everybody, and they don't. You have to would have to keep going. They don't last, right?
They're painful too.
Yeah, I've never had one, but yeah, probably would be. I mean, I don't sell this often, but I do have this S-acetylglutathione. It does seem to work well. I mean, even that, the low dose one is $2 a pill or something. It's kind of crazy how expensive it is. All right, so allergies. The other thing I should say though is I still think if you don't fix that gut dysbiosis, the person's gonna need glutathione forever.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
How much glutathione should you have per day as a supplement if you were going to take that?
It's hard to say, honestly. I mean, probably would depend on the form, but just from that form that I have, which is different than the one that you guys have, I would say between 100 to 300 milligrams, which is probably, I think, less than the one you guys have, but it kind of depends, honestly.
How do you test for it?
I'll show that at the end there.
Okay.
Yep.
Do you use kefir at all for the gut?
I don't really sell it as a supplement, but I'm as far as fermented foods and stuff, I think that's a good thing to do. Myself personally, I don't use a lot of kefir, but I don't have a problem with it or kombucha is a big thing now. Everyone's sucking that stuff down. I think you can take too much of that, but there's a benefit to it too. I've actually seen kombucha test well on patients, some of that stuff from that resurgence, or anyone been to that place that we get the kombucha shared? Oh, we did? Oh, that's it. Okay. Spell it?
What is it?
So allergies pollen is crazy right now. So a lot of people, when you're talking about allergies, they think, oh, it's just it's a really bad season, but sometimes you really need to look at your own health as to why the season is worse for you that year than as opposed to the other years. Allergies are just another example of an immune dysfunction, honestly. It's an overactive immune system. Now, if you have food allergies, that's typically going to be driven from a leaky gut scenario, which again brings us back to dysbiosis. But another big reason for allergy issues is, say you have seasonal allergies, right now, is if your adrenal glands are getting, you're really run down, then your allergy symptoms are going to be worse. This is why, if someone's allergies are really bad and they take a steroid, their symptoms will get way better. But you want your body's own steroids to be able to shut down that allergy response, and that's where adrenal function comes in. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Am I going too fast? You guys all right?
No.
All right. So stress. Stress is kind of at the root of any issue too, or I shouldn't say at the roots. I've said that a couple times. There's multiple roots. I should say that. But basically anyone that goes to see any practitioner for anything, they've probably reached a point of the stresses on their body are greater than their body's ability to handle that stress. So I have a big thing on adrenal stuff on my website actually, and we could do a whole talk on it, but I still think adrenal things are always going to be, they're usually secondary to something else. Like you need to try to figure out what is stressing your body. Like if you aren't sleeping and you're super stressed, you're going to be more susceptible to dysbiosis, and you can set off that vicious cycle in your body. Other ways that people stress themselves, like when it comes to stress, you want to control what you can control. So you might not be able to control your boss, but you can control what you eat, and you can control how you work out. You kind of can control your sleep. You can at least control your sleep habits. So when it comes to eating, caffeine and sugar are big stressors of the adrenal gland. You guys are probably on the anti-caffeine in the Weston A. Price group here. Some groups will say caffeine's healthy. It's not really a health food. But yeah. So like if someone, I don't really have a problem with someone drinking coffee like one a day. I basically will ask them like, do you need the coffee or do you like the coffee? If you need the coffee, that's a problem. We need to like address that. If you like it and you're only having 1 cup a day, that's not a big deal. But it's when you start getting up there and really, I don't know, multiple cups a day and you really need it to get through the day, now you've reached, there's something wrong. You need to figure that out. A big thing, like I like to run a lot and I do a lot of other different types of like exercise activities. People a lot of times are kind of their own worst enemy when it comes to exercise. Exercise should be a good stress on your system. It should make you like a better, more adaptable human being. But people kind of kick their ass exercising, like they just go too hard all the time. A lot of it just has to do with like our physical culture, like the way things are. If you're, honestly, I could do a whole talk on like exercise habits, but one way to look at it is if your life is super stressful, your boss breathing on your neck, you feel like you're having these like sugar crashes throughout the day, exercise can be helpful if it's easy. Like you shouldn't be like, at that moment in your life, you really shouldn't be going like all out exercise-wise. Like a good thing would be like you finished your workout and you can be like, oh, I could probably do that one again if I had to, type of thing. Like that'd be like a good like gauge for you. So we kind of touched on this a little bit. So like adrenals pump out cortisol, they also pump out other hormones. We'll just keep it the cortisol because it has the biggest effect on the immune system. So if your adrenals are constantly responding to stress and you're pumping out all this cortisol, you're going to create these like cortisol imbalances. There'll be times where your cortisol is high, and there'll be times where your cortisol is low. When your cortisol is high, that's going to kind of lead you susceptible to infections. When your cortisol is low, that's when you're going to be like hypersensitive. And that's a really dramatic oversimplification of a really kind of complex thing, but in general, that's a good way to think of it. All right, so key supplements for reducing inflammation. We already talked about butter. So I know like a big thing with the Weston A. Price is the fermented cod liver oil. Like omega-3s can definitely be helpful for calming down inflammation. I will say that I think people can do too much omega-3s. And a lot of times the omega-3s the person will respond better to an omega-3 supplement if they take vitamin A and D with it. Maybe they need to take vitamin A and E or some combination of antioxidants with that omega-3, and the person will respond better to it. That's why grass-fed butter is such an awesome thing to take, because it's got omega-3s in it. It's got healthy saturated fat in it. But like Kerrygold butter is like, if you look at it, it gets really yellow, which means like its vitamin A content is really high. Whereas like a Land O'Lakes, the vitamin A content isn't nearly the same. Magnesium is, I would definitely put that in my top 5 supplements.
How much?
If it's a new patient, usually want to tell them to take it until they start pooping a lot, and then start backing off.
Like 200?
Usually you'll start off at 400 milligrams.
Do you go with a specific magnesium or like?
The main ones I use in the office are glycinate and citrate, malate.
Do you ever use the L-threonate?
I don't. I'll use L-theanine for.
L-threonate magnesium. Magnesium L.
Yeah, so
It's the one that MIT developed. It would cross.
I've never used it. Is it the same as threonine though? Like is it-
Threonine. I'm probably saying it wrong.
Well, threonine's like sometimes I'll use theanine.
The one part, I'll say it this way. The one part is like a byproduct of the breakdown of vitamin C. Somehow
Okay.
they combined it with the magnesium so it'll cross the blood-brain barrier.
I've never used it, but yeah.
I was just curious if you.
Yeah.
You use liquid magnesium?
I do have some at the office. I just don't. In general, I just use the capsules and stuff.
Versatile, is it what they use for cholesterol too?
I don't think of resveratrol as a cholesterol thing, but I could see it being useful for that. I think of resveratrol as like what it comes from this Japanese knotweed plant, but I just think of it in general. It's a really good antioxidant. It'll test as a good antioxidant for the brain. That OPC, that's like a grapeseed extract. Vitamin C. So the only vitamins. I only use 2 different vitamin C's in the office. One is this Camu powder. The other one I use is this standard process Cataplex C. So I'm kind of biased towards whole foods when it comes to my supplements, and like not for everything, but for certain things. And what I mean by that is like there's vitamin C, which is like what they refer to as ascorbic acid. And then there's like the vitamin C complex, which is kind of like what you would get in a whole food. So like there's other parts of the vitamin C complex, like bioflavonoids and these like P factors and things like that. And nature's already done the work for us as far as making a vitamin C supplement that already has things in this nice balanced ratio. And then when we take too much ascorbic acid, I feel like it actually throws off that natural ratio of those other factors, if that makes sense. So like, I'd much rather give someone like a whole food source of like a natural food source that's just high in vitamin C, as opposed to like this high ascorbic acid dose. Same thing holds true for like vitamin E. And I guess I kind of don't obey my rules with vitamin A, but I'm always pushing the butter. It's kind of one way or the other.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
You keep talking about butter. How much butter do you consume a day, and how do you get it?
Try to shoot for at least a tablespoon a day.
So just like toast or vegetables?
I like to put it on a Kind bar. Honestly. I just take it and I put it on there. No, not a candy bar, one of those Kind bars. Like those almond bars or whatever. So like, yeah, I just slap it on there. If people see me, they think I'm like disgusting, but I just put it on there. Yeah, I mean the best way to, for most patients, the best way to get in your diet is like steam some broccoli or something for dinner. Load it on there.
Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid.
Yeah, right. I'm not against it. It's just the source would matter. I mean, it's kind of like what she was talking about with the pork, and that is an issue with animal fat foods, is the toxicity, like where the pig came from. So in some ways, you're almost going to be, if the food source isn't that good, you're almost going to be better off almost leaning more towards like the lean meat. But if the animal source is good, then eat the whole as much as you can. I wish I knew more about cooking or organ meats and stuff like that. I should come to these meetings more. But,
No, it's pretty true that when you're talking grass-fed, most of the fats in most commercially raised food are getting heavy metals and stuff from the pesticides,
yeah.
and it's stored in the fat more predominantly.
Yeah.
So that's why you're really wanting grass-fed, so you're not getting the heavy metals and the toxicity from the chemicals, because that's where it's predominantly stored.
Yeah, that's where it's gonna store. You know, I mean, as a side note, like, I almost feel certain patients that have obesity issues, I almost feel like their body won't let them, and they're doing all the right stuff, it's almost like their body won't let them lose the weight until they improve their detox pathways, and then they can start dropping weight. Like well, weight's a complex topic, but sometimes there's just reasons why someone won't drop weight, and another person can drop it like that.
Yeah, I'm curious about the grass-fed butter. Is it possible to eat too much? Because, like, for example, the Kerrygold butter, I just cut a block, like a quarter of it with each meal. So would you say that that's like too much? Because it sounds like everybody's pushing that, but that sounds like a lot.
No.
It just depends on the person, honestly. I mean, there are people who are cholesterol hyper responders, meaning like their cholesterol profile, they eat a lot of butter, it's not gonna look that good. I don't know, you can overdo anything. I would just disclaim it with that. But without really checking it out, or it'd be hard to say. Yeah.
So my son, we got a cholesterol profile done on him because my husband had a heart attack 2 years ago, and he's 11. But I can still put butter on his, even though his cholesterol is supposedly high.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be worried about him. I don't know, I definitely wouldn't be putting him on a statin medication or anything.
No.
For sure.
But we're supposed to be cutting down on fat, but
Grab some brochures before you go
Yeah,
to
I
the
mean,
Weston Price Foundation, and we have a website that you could read until the cows come home. There are article after article, and there's a lot of really good articles about cholesterol, written by doctors and people with PhDs on there. So very scientific articles that you could read on the Weston Price Foundation's website.
Like, I would agree with that. A lot of my, so like I have an article on my website about saturated fat, cholesterol, and heart disease, and a lot of my thoughts on that topic are kind of driven by Chris Masterjohn, which is like the main contributor to the Weston A. Price group. So I mean, an 11-year-old, I wouldn't really be. I mean, I would have to see something crazy on his blood work, like some major thing wrong, like some where I'd be worried about a heart attack.
Check out all his total balance.
Yeah, I mean, it would have to be really messed up, like 600 milligrams or something cholesterol level. Like it would have to be like crazy.
As long as he doesn't have a genetic thing with.
Yeah, like
familial.
But a lot of times they wouldn't. A kid wouldn't even make it to that age if they had that issue.
Kids need fat for a healthy nervous system, healthy brain development. So, and they needed to absorb their fat-soluble vitamins. You need to use some saturated fat, make your fat-soluble vitamins. So, but there's great articles on the Weston Price Foundation's website about fat and cholesterol and
Yeah, that's my main. Well, we can have someone come up. I can kind of show you how my treatment works. The last thing that on my slide that I have is just movement as an anti-inflammatory. So like exercise can be pro-inflammatory and it can be anti-inflammatory. Like one way to think of movement as an anti-inflammatory is like if I stub my toe, and every morning I woke up and I stubbed my toe again, I'm gonna kind of like set off this pain signal, which can keep setting off that inflammatory process like over and over and over again. One way that we break the inflammatory cycle is by blocking that pain signal. And one way to block the pain signal is through movement. Like if I hit my finger with a hammer, I'm gonna shake my hand because it'll stimulate these other nerves that will get to my brain faster than the pain nerves. So one thing that people don't do enough is take their body through ranges of motion, take all their joints through range of motion. This is something that I'm really big on as far as like natural movement type workshops. So I have a MoveNat certification, which basically what I do is I do a lot of like toddler type exercises. So like if you want to have strong shoulders and strong upper extremities, you want to hang. If you want to have a strong core, you should crawl. If you want to have strong legs, you should squat. And it's about as simple as you can make exercise for anybody. But if you have any questions about that, I could talk to you about that afterwards too. But do you have a question? Or, oh, okay. So I'll get into kind of like if people want to see how like my treatment works or if they got specific questions. Anyone that came to the seminar, if you're interested in my treatment approach, you get $25 off your initial visit. I will just say, like in general, when I'm treating patients, inflammation that's the biggest thing I'm trying to address on anybody, because I still think it's the biggest thing that sets off all these other issues. So like if you have chronic fatigue, you need to get inflammation under control first. I almost think like a lot of people's thyroid issues get driven from that too. Like a lot of people get this hypothyroid diagnosis, but it's because the body is inherently shutting that down because it knows it can't handle the inflammatory load of energy production. That's kind of my own personal theory. I don't really have a lot of like research study to back it up, but that's like my own thought process. There's a lot of other reasons for thyroid issues, but kind of goes along the same lines. So, does anyone have an issue or want to come on up and be a demo person? All right, come on up there.
What are you doing? Cracking backs or?
No,
we're amputating today.
All right, so when it comes to inflammation, like there's a lot of different ways to try to figure out what's causing it on somebody, right? So you can have a lab test done. The lab tests, I'm not against lab tests. The problem is you can't test for everything, and like you might have a lab marker that shows up that's positive for inflammation. Like say someone has this thing that shows up that says like, oh, they have a positive ANA. Now they're thinking there's some autoimmune issue. But that's all it does is tell you that there's a problem. It doesn't really tell you what the problem is or how to fix it. So not that this is the only way to do things, but this is how I do it. So do you have any pain anywhere?
Yes, a lot actually right here. I'm actually trying to see a doc actually right here.
Okay.
And your joints.
And also in my joints, so I have joint pain for some reason. I don't know why. I just got blood work done and I have no idea what it is.
Okay.
The doctor doesn't know.
So if you kick your shoes off. All right. If you go on your back.
Okay. Head there.
Yeah. All right. So when I'm treating someone, like it's nice when I have a patient that has a specific complaint, like it hurts right here. It's not always the case. Like you might have a patient where it's like I'm just tired all the time, and it's kind of hard to. You can find stuff wrong with them, but it's just a little bit more complicated than like, oh, I have pain in this shoulder. So it's kind of nice that he's got that. So. So everything, majority of my treatment is based off of muscle testing. And muscle testing, you guys might have, like, you guys had my friend Luke here, Dr. Luke. So he's a friend of mine. We do similar stuff, but it's also very different too. But like if I need to get work done, I go see him and we kind of work on each other. But so to me, what muscle testing is it's a reflection of how your nervous system is firing. All right. So I'm just going to show you guys a muscle test on his arm. So if he locks this elbow right there, I want you to push towards me. All right, so that's a good strong muscle there, okay? If he bends this knee, brings that arm up again, push towards him, okay? That shuts that muscle off, okay? Wow. Normal, all right? The reason why that's normal is when this leg comes up and it hits the table, it actually simulates a gait position. In this case, it makes his right leg the push-off leg. So if my right leg's the push-off leg, my right arm comes forward, my left arm goes back. So a muscle that brings the arm forward will shut off, okay? The big takeaways from that are, one, to just see how, for him to feel how it turns on and off. But the reason why it turns on and off is because it's the nervous system that controls how these muscles fire, okay? So now what I want to do is, because he's got this pain in his shoulder, I should be able to find some imbalance in that area, that just to kind of show you that there's something wrong there. All right, so you go on your stomach. All right, now pop this down here. All right, just relax. All right, bring this arm up. All right, there. Keep that there. Push back. Good. Now we're gonna come back further, so we're kind of rolling back this way. That's good. Push back. That's good. Bring your arm. Lock your elbow. Okay. Right there. Go towards the ceiling. Okay, let that go. So there's a weakness there on that shoulder.
No.
Okay, see if you can feel that. Lock that elbow towards the ceiling. Like that one locks. Okay. Turn this here. Hang on one second. Turn the knee like that. Good. Push up. Like that one, I barely have to push. I can push it down. Okay. So that's just showing you an imbalance. So in the first thing showing up on him, as far as like a neurological imbalance, is this muscle that goes from his shoulder blade to his spine on the right is shut off, okay? And on the left, it's not, all right? That's all that means. And what's creating that is the nervous system is creating that, okay? So now I'm going to try to figure out what I have to do to normalize that signal, all right? Let me come back here. Lock that. Okay. Push up. Okay, let go. Push up. Push up. All right. Push up. Push up. Okay.
Seems like I'm getting stronger.
Yeah, certain things will turn on, other ones won't. Have your eyes go up and to the left.
Look that way, you mean?
Have your eyes like kind of like
like that?
Yeah, there you go. Push up. Good. Head in the hole there. Push up. Okay. There you go. Oh, push up. Okay. So
I think it's here.
yeah, the first so the first place I have to treat on him to essentially break this pattern, because that's the one way to think of this stuff, is it's all about breaking patterns that your body is trapped in. Same thing with breaking vicious cycles your body is trapped in, okay? So, and that's how you can look at these imbalances. It's the nervous system is creating this pattern that his body is trapped in, and we need to figure out what we need to do to break that pattern, all right? So the first thing I need to do to break the pattern on him is treat the spot in his hip. And I'll show you just another example of a neurological imbalance. If he bends his knees, keep your legs relaxed. All right, so that knee can get to your butt. That one's tighter.
Yeah,
okay?
it is.
All right, so like you can see how easy I can drive that one in there, and then on this side it just kind of stops. Like if I push hard, it just springs back. All right. So, but if I rub his hip right here,
It's really tender there too.
yeah, and then we do that again, bend that knee. You can see it just like goes all the way, okay? But you can feel
Yeah,
that, right?
yeah, I can
Just
feel
lets
that.
go. Same thing, like if just give it here, slide to the edge here.
Still face down?
Yeah, that's good. Bring this here, turn your hand up, push up. Okay, so that's a weak muscle. You can think of like this knee not bending, that's like a tight muscle. So when I get on the spot, that's like what would like kind of fix the neurological circuit, which is like right here on him. Push up, and then that turns that on, okay? So that like breaks the pattern.
Yeah, it seems stronger.
So where that inflammation stuff comes into play is like, all right, well I could essentially like break the pattern he's in by rubbing this issue, but I could also probably find some anti-inflammatory nutrient that would do the same thing. Okay? So let's try. Do you have any gut issues or anything?
No.
Alright. Your head all there. Bring this up. Push it in. Okay, let it go. Push it in. Good. Alright. So same type of thing here. If we bend these knees, like that one gets to his butt, that one's the tighter one, okay? I take this, we'll just place that right there in your hand. Bring those legs down again, bend those knees, and then it just lets go, okay?
Oh wow.
I know.
It's so funny.
That was that cactus herb, golden thread.
Is it because I'm holding it, or is it because?
Well, the magnet helps to amplify it too. So like I used to only have people taste things, because that made the most sense to me neurologically, like how their nervous system would respond to something. But the magnet really does amplify like the chemical energetic signal of the substance, and his body picks it up, and it just lets that leg go. There's a lot more to the treatment than that, but that's kind of how I try to figure things out on
Can I ask you a
patients.
question then? You know how they always have, you can buy those magnets?
Yeah.
What's the deal with that?
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm just throwing it in the other.
Yeah, that's a totally different thing. But yeah, I mean, so what happens then too is like, all right, so now I'm going to treat this spot on you.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why, in general, treatments can be kind of frustrating. Like, you walk out of someone's office and then your body just goes right back to what it was. And that's because you'll see, like, I'm going to treat this spot, and there's a good chance that that shoulder muscle will turn on, but then there's going to be a new place I have to go. And it's because the nervous system's constantly adapting. So, like, it doesn't, the nervous system's not static. So everything that I do to him that treats his nervous system, I can't do the same thing. I won't get the same effect from doing the same thing twice. I don't know if that makes sense. But.
Well, it moves is what you're saying, right?
Yeah. So like you're gonna have a new priority.
How long does it usually take for it to finally? Depends on the situation.
Like a new patient, it's like 90 minutes.
Yeah.
But I mean, the bigger issue. I mean, it'd be sweet if I could fix everybody in one visit. Yeah. It's just there's things in your life that will cause the pattern to come back. Even though you're taking the right stuff, like there's just certain things, like if you have like a chronic Lyme infection, that's one of the more difficult things to treat. And part of that is like what you need to fight that infection will always, I shouldn't say always change, it changes frequently, a lot more frequently than people would realize. Or like, you're treating someone, say you're treating someone for a gut issue, and you're giving them all the right stuff, and their gut is doing better. But now what's happening is their liver is getting like overloaded because you're actually killing off all this stuff in their gut, and now your body's got to detoxify that. So now the next time the person comes in is, all right, now I gotta support your liver or something like that, and that's actually pretty common too. Yeah, it's just things change. So like if we go back to this muscle. Good. All right. So if we go back to this, bend your knees. That's still there. So that's still screwed up. As far as like that left leg doesn't bend as good as the right one. Let's see if we can find like a new spot on it. Bring this on. Bend your elbows. Push back. Good. Push back. Go on your back. Bend that knee. Go back. That way. All right, that's good. Go back. Good. Drop that. Take that. Touch right there. Go. Right there. That's good. Drop that down. Hands up. Towards your left hip. Here. This way. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, let go. Stay right there. Go ahead.
I don't know.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Look up and right. Go ahead. Good. Look straight. Go ahead. Alright, you go on your stomach again. So we moved on him. The initial weakness he had was over here, like when I tested his arm, going this way, push up. Okay? But now when I test his arm in a slightly different position, hold right there, push up.
Oh, I have no strength.
Yeah, there's like nothing there, right? So like drop that arm down. I didn't like in truth I didn't check that until just now. But the next place we have to go is for that muscle. Like if he bends his knees, okay, and we got the loose one, tight one, and I come down here,
Good idea.
rub through here,
And then what we're doing
and we bend those knees again. And then like you can see it kind of just goes so funny. So Thanks for coming up. Appreciate it.
You're really good. He's awesome.
Yeah. So.
What were you touching his feet for when you kept going up to the front and touching his
Yeah,
toes?
so I'm trying to find those spots. And
what would you feel that would tell him when you touch his feet?
the muscle response will change. Like I'm going quick, so he might not even feel it. Like I'll feel it easier than he will.
Okay.
But there's specific reflexes that work a certain way, and when the reflex behaves in a certain way, it tells me like, all right, I got to find that spot in his back, or it helped me find that spot in his hip. Otherwise, it would take longer essentially. So I'm looking at these very like specific reflexes, almost from like a neurological hierarchy, like what could be creating this weakness on him, and then I just need to find it.
So you kind of find it in the whole network.
Yeah,
like,
so like
the bound up spot here that causes this.
Yeah,
over
so yeah, that initial spot on him, like he wouldn't think like, oh, my shoulder's bothering me, you better treat my left butt, you know? But neurologically what's happening there is it's almost like he's getting hit with a hammer in his hip, and it's creating these other like muscle imbalances coming off of that spot. So then you treat that spot, the nervous system adapts to it, and now the muscle pattern that the nervous system created changes. What ends up happening is you'll get a specific pattern that relates to like a specific organ issue, and that's where I really look at the biochemistry stuff, like what's stressing this organ, which probably sounds really weird, but
So this is a lot more than kinesiology.
yeah, I mean, it's still AK, but it's like all I really do is muscle tests. It's like someone might play the guitar, but they don't play like Eric Clapton plays. Not like I'm trying to say.
Right.
It's just
that level.
Yeah, it's just a whole nother level of it, as opposed to like muscle testing is. It's way more of an art than what a lot of people would think it is. So you have to be doing it all the time and like really looking at it, and like on one patient, the amount of muscle tests I might do might be, I don't know, like 1,000. I don't even know. Like it's so many. And then the big thing too is just trying to like. It wouldn't. In fairness, if he came up here, somebody could probably go through and just crack his back and change that leg length on him, you know? Because that would have been enough to temporarily break the pattern. But the real success is in how much you can dig on a person and pull out these issues that are really hard to find. And that takes time, honestly. That's why like when I see like an initial visit's like 90 minutes, because you're trying to get through as much stuff as you can and just constantly dig for these problems. Because that is the hardest part, is like you're just not with someone 24 hours a day, and you're trying to do the best you can to find out where they're getting screwed up.
Isn't it like layers you have to deal with?
Yeah, essentially. Yeah, I mean, everyone talks about that. This is my way of doing it, you know.
How much do you charge?
Initial visit is 150, and then so it'd be 125 for you guys.
And then after that visit?
Then it's 75.
Do you take insurance?
I don't take insurance. I can take an HSA or a flex spending account. You can submit to insurance or if someone was in like a car accident, they could submit that.
Does it work usually?
Car accident, definitely. The thing that's tough is like my wife, with my wife's job, like she can get like pretty good insurance through her health plan, and like through like independent health, and the copay for a chiropractor through independent health is like $40. Right. Yeah, I mean it depends on me. But this is like the Cadillac plan at her work, right? And if I went to a chiropractor and they saw that, I'd pay them $40. They'd actually have to literally pay me back $13 because that's all independent health is gonna pay. Like it's crazy.
Yeah, I know.
But I don't want to get into all that stuff.
When you worked on him, is it always the opposite side? Like
No, not always.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, if I like kept treating him, I might reach a point where the right leg actually became the tight one. Like the neurological balance, almost, it will flip. You don't really, honestly, you don't really know, but it happens a lot actually.
So basically, the whole nerve tree fires.
Yeah.
Whenever you do something, you have a muscle thing.
Yeah.
But just one, it's just like a backup or
You're trying to basically fix that neurological circuit. So like whatever blew the circuit breaker or blew the fuse box, you're trying to find that spot. And truthfully, there's a lot of different ways to fix the fuse box, but I do it this way because I think it's the best way to look at everything that could be setting off the fuse box, basically. Yeah.
I just wonder, how effective is this on autoimmune, like people with MS or other?
It can be effective for sure. Because like MS for example, to me is still not a really good diagnosis of what's going on, right? Like it's still like kind of renaming the symptom or renaming what you're finding on an MRI image. You still haven't really dug for what's creating that inflammatory response. This is a way to look at that and try to identify what's causing that, you know? So it's tough. I mean, I can't fix everything. It's just it's a treatment approach that is neglected, I guess you could say. Like that dysbiosis thing, which is like the most important thing to me, there's just not a good way to do that in a typical clinical setting, and it just isn't getting addressed, and I think it's the most screwed up thing on every patient.
Can the dysbiosis cause his pain?
Yeah, for sure. Because especially the one thing I tested on him was like a good herb for that.
You treat it the way you treated him now.
Yeah. Or that's how I try to figure it out. Yeah, for sure.
You should treat and also physically.
Yeah. So the reason why I treat the way I do too is like I'm using the neurological responses through the muscle test. So I'm using these muscle test responses to try to figure out where the problem is and to try to figure out what he needs to fix the problem. And the one thing that will screw up a muscle test more than anything else is if he has all these like little trigger points everywhere. So I kind of need to address these things first in order to get like a clearer signal of where the problem is. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So then if you treated his gut issues, would it get better, and as long as he stayed on that diet, it would pretty much go away?
It should.
He said
Can be more complicated than that, but yeah, in general, yeah. I mean, that's
I have a wheat allergen, if that makes a difference.
He doesn't even know he has.
I'm gluten sensitive.
Yeah.
That makes a
there you
difference.
go.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I would say 80% of my patients have a gut issue, whether or not they come in with it or not, or know it or not. It's just the way it is. But yeah.
How do you test for leaky gut? How do you know you
I don't really have like necessarily a test for leaky gut. There's a specific muscle pattern that will show up on someone that's indicative of a small intestine stress, and depending on what the person responds to fix that muscle pattern, that's kind of how I'll tell them like maybe certain foods they need to avoid or certain things they need to fix the gut issue. Like in some ways it's like, all right, if you have food allergies, especially if you have multiple ones, you have leaky gut. You know, doesn't even matter, right? And then it's more like what would you do to fix it? And the biggest things for fixing that are going to be things to help repair the gut, which would be like vitamin A and D, and then usually like dysbiosis type things. So like those like antimicrobial herbs are kind of the biggest things for it, and then avoiding any foods that could be stressing it. And truthfully, actually, a lot of food sensitivities are temporary. I mean, not all of them, I should definitely say that, but there's a lot of people that see it all the time where like a food was an issue and then you fix certain things, it's just not an issue anymore. But yeah.
After your initial visit, how many visits would it be, like weekly or like?
It depends what's going on. I mean, in general, I want to tell the person give me 4 visits.
Oh, just
But
I was thinking you're gonna say 3 visits a week for.
no, I definitely don't do it like once a week. It depends on, or I mean like multiple times a week. Maybe like if someone comes in, he's coming in and his primary complaint is that shoulder, I might see him today and would want to see him on Friday, but then I probably wouldn't see him till like the next Friday, and then maybe the next week, and then try to space it out essentially. So it's definitely a different approach than like you go see someone like, all right, you're coming in 3 times a week for the next 4 months. It's definitely not what it is. So that, yeah, that answers your question.
Just out of curiosity in general, like someone was in a motor vehicle accident, you know, like say they hurt their neck, their back, and they had a concussion.
Yeah.
And they go a year, and they're still just not right in the head, or they're having issues,
Yeah.
you know, and they're eating wrong, and they know they are, whatever, and they can't, you know, something like that. It would be much more involved with you. How
Yeah,
would
but
you-
those are like my bread and butter ones actually.
You actually,
Because those are what from my perspective or from my background, because I came from a regular chiropractic musculoskeletal background, my best thing in treating is a chronic injury. The hardest thing for a chronic injury patient is for me to tell them, you need to stop eating gluten because it's causing you to not heal from this chronic injury, if they're not open to it. But that's definitely, I'd rather treat a chronic injury person than a chronic fatigue person. Part of it is just because of how the muscle testing works. It's so easy for me to find something wrong on a chronic injury person, whereas on a chronic fatigue person, it's a little bit more complicated. Like it's not like, because if you have pain somewhere, I can find muscle imbalances there super easy. It's not hard at all. When you have like, I'm tired, it's like, all right, I gotta try to screw you up to find something wrong. And then it's not that this approach can be good for chronic fatigue. It's at least something compared to like what your GP is gonna offer you. But yeah, those are my, like someone that's been in an accident, like especially someone that's been in an accident and they were pretty good before their accident and now they're a mess. That's like my best thing. But
what about someone like if you have thyroid issues?
yeah, there are specific muscle patterns that will show up. It's the same type of thing. Like if someone's got a thyroid issue, the thyroid is a symptom and not the cause. Or like there's usually things that are driving that thyroid issue, and this is a way to try to figure out those other issues. So it's definitely something that I deal with on a regular basis. Yeah.
I have a quick question. Cod liver oil, would that be one of those things like the butter, or to help you?
It can definitely help for sure. Like I don't use a ton of it in the office. I know it's like a big thing with the Weston price group. Part of it is just trying to maximize the patient's dollar, and for me, the things that have the biggest bang for the buck are these antimicrobial herbs that I use. That being said, if a patient came in with like unlimited resources, I wouldn't be against them using like fermented cod liver oil or omega-3 supplements. They can definitely help. Like people don't eat enough omega-3 fatty fish for sure. I know I don't. I probably get decent omega-3s from the amount of butter and the raw milk that I get. But I think those supplements can be beneficial. I don't use them that much.
You're talking about those 3 that you took, the nani, the neem, and the coptis?
Yeah, but I got like, I don't know how many supplements in my office. I probably have like 200 different things that I use. But
Do you use standard process?
I use standard process. I use like 7, I don't know. I have a bunch of different ones.
No, what line, do you have your own line, or?
No, I'm kind of a supplement, I won't say.
Junkie?
Yeah, it's like a nicer word for supplement whore. But, so like I'm not really too married to any supplement company. I don't know. I have contracts with a bunch of different ones. I think I have like 7 or 8 different ones in my office. I don't know.
pick and choose what you like.
Not
Yeah.
everybody can make everything the best.
Yeah, like certain stuff standard process makes is awesome, and certain things like I probably use this one company more than any other one. It's a Supreme Nutrition Products, which is a really small company, but I definitely spend most of my money on them. I use Thorne Research. I use Pure Encapsulations, Biotics Research. What else? Claire Labs. Those are my favorite probiotics. I don't know. There's probably other ones, but those are my main ones.
I did one quick question. Which herb did you say would work well for him? The last one you had?
Well, truthfully, I wouldn't want to recommend one to him without doing more thorough inspection. But he just showed right off the bat. He showed a good response to this Coptis herb. But truth be told, there's probably 20 to 30 things I could have tested on him that would have shown some good response at that time. That's another reason for doing all this other treatment stuff before you start assessing supplements, because the body's going to kind of, even if it's just a compensation, if it allows the body to compensate better, it'll show a positive neurological response, even though it's not necessarily addressing the root issue. Yeah. Oh, all right.
Just as a status update, I actually felt it move to my right butt now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it moved like from my left to my right. It was
great.
Change the pattern.
Yeah.
Blood work, blood tests come into play with your practice, and do you have people take home like from their first visit, like a lengthy questionnaire to get an idea of their diet, their lifestyle, what have you?
The intake form is pretty long. As far as like on the initial visit, I'm hoping to get that information on the diet and stuff. And the nice thing about most of the people that are here is the diet hopefully is going to be pretty locked in, or better than 95% of the population, or probably more than that.
Is it helpful if someone brings blood work that they already
Oh,
have
yeah,
done?
I mean, I'm not against blood work. I would do more blood work stuff. It's a pain in the ass in New York State for chiros to order blood work.
You said it.
So I'm definitely not against it. The more information I have, the better. That being said, I even from the functional lab perspective, where all these new fancy blood tests and stuff, I still don't think they can get some of the results that I can get in the amount of time, just because when you're working off of blood work all the time, you're always going to be kind of behind the eight ball, because it's like, all right, we got your blood work, try this stuff, and now we're going to check your blood work again in a couple months, and we'll see if it worked. And if it didn't work, we're going to try this other stuff. And it's a way longer, slower process than these neurological responses that you can see happen like instantly. But all right. Well, thanks for. Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
What is metal chelation?
What about it?
What is it?
I mean, it's basically a way to like. Are you talking about like IV or?
I don't know.
Did I write it on the thing?
Yeah.
That one of the slides. You listed on one of your slides.
Oh, all right. So like heavy metals are an issue for patients. I don't do like metal chelation therapy per se. Like there is someone locally that does that. But I do treat heavy metal toxicity on patients, and I do it more through like improving detox pathways and giving like heavy metal excreting substances. So I don't really do like the chelation therapy that they do. But there is someone locally that does it. She's good though. You guys know Dr. Jennings? She'd be a good one for to put on the list.
Where is she located?
She's in East Aurora. Or no, not yet. She's Cardia Health. You guys heard of that? Cardia Health. She's gonna be moving to East Aurora. I don't think she's there yet.
What's her first name?
Jennifer.
Jennifer Jennings?
Yeah.
Okay.
She took over Dr. Barnes's practice.
Do you recommend any reading for somebody who might be wanting to come to you to get a little more background about your process?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have a decent amount of stuff on my website.
Do you have any books?
no books, but
Too busy.
I feel like I have a decent amount of information on there. I mean, the other thing too, I should have said this. If you want to just see how this treatment works for you, if you're not sure about it, I can do like a free 15-minute consult too. That's honestly the best way, because sometimes it's hard to believe like what the muscle test is doing until you actually feel it. So that's something that I offer to patients too. Just 'cause, honestly, it's better for me if they come in knowing what they're getting into, rather than like, what the hell are you doing? Thought you were gonna crack my back, and I'm like, no. So like I do some like typical adjustments, like chiropractic adjustments, but it's definitely more secondary to other things that I do. Because mainly, to me, the same thing, part of it's just my philosophy on why those adjustments are needed. The adjustment, to me, is a symptom of muscle imbalances. The muscle imbalances are a symptom of nervous system imbalances. The nervous system imbalances are a symptom of everything. There's everything going on with you. So if you can balance out the nervous system, all that other stuff will get better. Still sometimes need to adjust something, but it's oftentimes is you can fix the need for it.
Now, like if somebody's taking like prolotherapy with the needles and stuff,
Yeah.
will that
No.
interfere with you? What you
No,
do?
not right now. That'd be fine. All right. Well, thanks for having me, guys.
The information in this lecture is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended to substitute for the advice provided by your doctor or other healthcare professionals. You should not rely upon or follow the program or techniques or use any of the products and services made available by or through the lecture without obtaining the advice of a physician or other healthcare professional. The nutritional and other information in this lecture are not intended to be and do not constitute healthcare or medical advice.